Welcome to the Trad Dads podcast, where we examine cultural and political issues through the lens of traditional thought. This is Levi Russell, and I have Levi Breederland with me. And today we're going to be talking about the whole idea of sort of the Homerification of fatherhood and the disdain for dads that you see in popular media all the time. We're calling this the Homerification of dads. Levi, why are we using that term?
So by Homer, we're meaning Homer Simpson and not, some other Homer. And Homer Simpson is the quintessential example of the father figure who's, he's there, but he's not really present in his kids' lives. Like, he's always portrayed as watching TV and like prioritizing personal time. And so he's either at work and not there, or he's on the couch with his beer and his whatever he is watching on TV. And
he's also stupid. Like, he's just totally inept. He doesn't know how to do anything.
Yeah, he's portrayed as this guy with a small brain who, if he tried to do something other than watch TV or his job that he fails at, that he wouldn't succeed. And then from that, you see other TV shows and movies where if there is a father figure in the family life that's being portrayed on screen, he's this not necessarily as explicit. Like, that's the thing that the Simpsons can do, is they can really be very blatant about it because it's a cartoon. But it's more and more common to not have a father figure in the family in the show, or to have one who's not really a character and he's just kind of talked about and has a recurring appearance, but he's not really, he's not present in the storyline.
Yeah, and the reason it's so noticeable is because it compared with Leave It to Beaver and the Brady Bunch and shows like that, those shows had a lot more of a balance. Somebody screwed something up. I mean, obviously there has to be drama in the show, but it wasn't always, or 80% of the time, it wasn't the incompetence or the the lack of desire to do anything of the father that creates the problems. It was just something happening, or it was the mom, or the kids, or something like that. And obviously there's plenty of that too. It's just every time Homer is inserted in a situation, he's just either, like you said, aloof or stupid. And so it's just kind of funny that, like, there was a time when the dads were not it wasn't so subversive and anti-family. It was very much understanding of the roles of the parents and their unique capacities to contribute to family life. But so the thing that got us thinking about all this was the idea that, when you're leaving work and one of your buddies is like, hey, let's go get a beer, and so you inevitably will say something like, well, I got to ask the boss, as if you are Homer and your wife is this very calm, rational, sagely figure who you, because you're just a stupid child, you have to ask her permission for everything. And by the way, you don't really care about your kids that much. You're not really concerned about being part of their lives or anything. You're just kind of, this thing that throws money at the house, or whatever. And it's just kind of weird, because it doesn't, I mean, we say that stuff, but it's because I think we pick up on it from TV. We just pick up on it from that.
Yeah. And we also see it like in shows that aren't specifically about families. Like, there is definitely less shows nowadays about a family because we've got more options. So, the target market has gotten smaller. But you see it in shows that have, couples interacting, and you see the same thing, like the male counterpart makes comments and about like asking permission of the girlfriend or the wife for freedom to act in one way or another. And it's almost as if we're being shown that the woman is the one who runs the house and has final say, rather than, like a complementarian approach of, the husband and wife, or the boyfriend and girlfriend, come to conclusions together and decide on schedules and plans and budgets together.
Well, yeah, and I think that actually makes a good point too, because even as bad as The Simpsons is about this stuff, it the fact that they had three children was at least better than oh man, that show with the big comedian guy Kevin, and then his wife, who's played by Leah Remini. It's just this couple, and it's just this couple and their couple friends, and there's no children whatsoever. Which, I mean, I guess that's just the show, but still, it's this idea. It's like, oh well, there's all these people just childless, weird marriages, where they're like roommates. They just work and whatever. There isn't anything unique about it. But
yeah, and portraying a show like that where there's multiple couple friends, it seems so unrealistic, because in real life, if you have a group of 5 couples, the chance of one or more of them having kids, it doesn't last long enough for 7 seasons of a TV show or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Which, to be fair, The Simpsons have been stuck in time for what, 3 decades or something like that.
Yeah, at least that's the benefit of the cartoon. At least right. they can blend time as much as needed.
Yeah, that's true. But it seems like there's all this complaint about the way TV shows portray fatherhood or family life in general, and the idea that a dad can have a distinct role, and that that traditional gender roles are good. And that there's a certain amount of leadership for the dad that makes sense. But it just seems like you always get nothing but a bunch of complaining about it. You don't ever get anyone saying, oh yeah, it makes sense that, we should figure out a way to push back on this, or figure out a way to, convince the next generation that, this is just silly and it's not realistic and you shouldn't think this way.
It's awkward too, because, sometimes they'll say like, oh yeah, we should have, a TV show that affirms the family values that we want. But then they realize that it's a huge investment to get a TV show out there and whatnot. But there's never any discussion of other things that could be done and discussions that could happen, other than just saying like, oh, I wish there was movies that, had good dads in it.
Or when they do make those movies, it's just full of cringe.
Yeah,
it's
they're
just
horrible.
So poorly done. They don't get good actors. It's just bad. Yeah.
Which is partially just, the fact that money is hard to come by, and
that's true.
To get something on TV where people will see it and it'll actually make a difference, you need more than $1 million kind of thing.
Well, and I think that's what's so great about the continuing collapse in the cost of media in general. As you can, for instance, I know our parish signed up for this thing called Formed.
Oh yeah, ours does too.
Formed, yeah, and there's all kinds of great stuff on there that's very. Again, it's not the same kind of entertainment, but I do know there's I can't remember the name of it, but there's like this Netflix alternative that will actually get the movies and they'll just edit out all the
interesting,
the raunchy scenes and the bad language and stuff. And there was this huge fight because the Hollywood types were like, you can't, this is a violation of our intellectual property and all this. And basically, after this huge protracted legal battle, the way they got out of it was, when you sign up for this service and you watch a movie, what happens is, you pay them a monthly. I think this is how it works. You pay them a monthly fee, and then whenever you want to watch a movie, you technically have to buy the movie, and then you sell the movie back to them when you're done watching it.
Oh, so then it's yours. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So it would just be them, oh, I have this edited DVD that I own, and then I give it to you for a little bit, and then I take it back. So, it's it's kind of an interesting way to deal with that. So then I guess the idea is, okay, well, let's dig in a little bit and try to figure out exactly what it is that's going wrong and how to fix the problem. So the first one that you and I were kind of talking about before is this idea that there's only 24 hours in a day, and we all have to prioritize. And if we're spending, if dads are spending too much time at work, because we all know this. I mean, that's the reason why we have a quote unquote gender pay gap, is because women like flexible jobs with less hours, and so they get paid less. um, so, men tend to work more, dads tend to work more, whatever. And sometimes we just work too much. And so then, we get this Homer effect.
And yeah, the having a, the full-time job, and if the dad is the one who said, like, I'm going to, take the higher paying job because I want the mom to be able to stay home, and then, the dad is commuting an hour each day and sitting in traffic, and when you get home from work and you're tired from work, and then you're also tired from sitting in traffic and having all the cars around you honking all the time and all that, you don't have the energy to put into, being present, and you end up sitting on the couch and watching TV along with Homer.
Right. And so I think, okay, you could come up with 1,000 different scenarios, right? But I think the idea is you want to come up with some general principles about how this ought to work. And so to some extent, I think it's, there's different levels of income that matter here. So if your income is just enough, so if you're busting your butt 15 hours a day or whatever, just to make it so you can survive, you can meet the needs of the family. Well, I mean, you don't have much of a choice, right? That's just what you have to do. But if you are putting too many things in the need category that actually belong in the want category, right? So, insert discussion of poverty of spirit and that sort of thing. The reality is that you should just take those things out of the need category and just say, okay, are these wants more important than spending time with my kids or my wife or whatever? And that's really what should drive your decision on how much you work. Because, work is a good thing. I'm all for the Benedictines and all of that, but it's definitely not better than, a basic amount of time with your family.
Yeah, it's a bit of the prioritization there. Like, I know one family that they decided to sacrifice their large house in a nice rural neighborhood and move closer to where the father was working, so that he wouldn't have to spend so much time in his commute. So they went to an older house in a smaller neighborhood and a smaller house and all that. But he ended up, getting home from work at 5:30 instead of 6:30, and had so much more time in the evening with his kids that,
and especially when you have small kids.
Yeah, exactly. When
that first couple hours after work is so important, because I mean they need to go to bed. They need like 10 hours of sleep. So you just can't give up those precious couple hours there right after work. And
the time when they're small too, you really, once that's gone, you're never getting it back. When they're grown up, you can schedule time whenever you want, and it's not as special as, those few hours you get in the week when you're really busy, but your kids are young. And
there's a great song about that called Cats in the Cradle. I think, can't remember the name of anyway, it's an old song, but I'm 5 years older than you, so I can just say everything's old, and and just assume you haven't heard of it.
I have not heard of it, but that's because I had a sheltered childhood.
So, I think so. I think that's an interesting way to think about that, and I think it's a way of thinking that is, for the most part, lost on most people. I mean, not that they're too dumb to conceive of it. It's just that it's so unpopular to think that way, that there's just, why would you think that way about this sort of thing? And I think obviously when you're a lot younger, when you're 20 years old, and you're not married yet, I mean, this whole problem just seems, you just seem completely lost as to what you would even do. But once I think, I don't know, people that have our worldview, I think we sort of come to these things when we just realize the superior wisdom of it over sort of what we've been able to rationalize. You know what I mean?
Yeah, when you start seeing those studies of, kids that have a present father figure throughout their childhood end up statistically more successful in their later life, and all those kind of studies. It makes a difference.
Yeah. Well, and so, I mean, then we think about the homerification thing. So it's not just the individual decisions that, our families make in terms of, these trade-offs between needs and wants and that sort of thing. It's just the idea that everybody thinks this way because Hollywood just pushes this narrative so much. And, TV is basically, it's just the way you think, I mean, you see it so much that, I mean, how are you supposed to think any other way?
Yeah, call back to our screen time episode where we said that we should cut back on our screen time. It's like,
put that in the
prioritize other ways of spending time with your family so that you're not getting these bad examples of ways to ruin things.
Yeah, exactly. And so then, but this is another good example of the idea of alternatives, or basically conservatives complaining about the fact that there aren't alternatives and then never, getting off their ass and building them. So yeah, you have the option of just turning off the TV and finding something else to do, which is great.
And if you turn off the TV enough that you can cut back on what you're spending on TV and, not feel the need for such a nice fancy TV, then you also have, money that you can put into, some nice board games or something.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, then that's, I'm not going to say what kind of TV I have after that comment, but yeah, no, you're right. It's all about priorities in that sense. But I think in the bigger picture, when we think more, from the macro perspective, okay, that it's all fine and good to say we should just turn off the TV, but a lot of people aren't going to do that as they're, if they're on this sort of long journey from, whatever the current zeitgeist is to, closer to our position on this. They're not going to come up with that one right away, right? And so the fact that there might be alternatives, like we were talking about Formed, this streaming service that has lots of great wholesome Catholic content on it, and this other alternative streaming services that allow you to download movies and stuff like that are edited or whatever, and or just sort of previewing, right? I mean, I think there are plenty of kids in our generation that the parents just sort of previewed stuff to make sure that it was okay because they didn't trust the rating agencies.
Yeah, or using alternative rating agencies that gave a more accurate depiction of what's in the story.
Right. And so it goes back to what you were saying before about just the fact that you just have to, you can incentivize Hollywood by just paying them for the things that are good and not paying them for the things that are bad.
Yeah, if they notice a difference in funding for specific types of characters, hopefully those of us who want to have more emphasis on traditional family styles will make a difference.
Yeah,
but,
I just think it's so hard to do that because I mean it's one of these things, and we talked about this I think in the Screen Time episode where talking about Tucker Carlson saying that there's sort of a collective action problem component to this, and the sort of snide response is, oh, well, are you saying parents are too stupid to be able to handle their own kids? It's like, no. What we're saying is that there is a collective action problem, and you can't deal with a collective action problem by like three people saying, you know what, Hollywood, I don't want your stuff.
Yeah, it's yet another boycott that doesn't go anywhere because, when you want to do a boycott, you need everyone to do it.
Right. And I think ironically, there's a Simpsons joke where it's like Homer's dad or whoever, the old man, gets in the newspaper and it says, man shakes fist at cloud or something. It's like, that's pretty much about us. That's pretty much how effective that sort of thing is. So yeah, so I think to kind of bring this around is that, whether it's the keeping up with the Joneses component and saying, oh, wow, you might think these things are just wants that you should ignore and prefer family time for, but really they're needs. You have to have, a giant TV and a boat and a big house and all of this. And so you got to work your ass off and never be in a place where you can just come home and relax and spend time with your family. And, building on top of that is this whole, Hollywood subversion of the family and things like that. And so it just creates this overarching view that there is no distinct role for dad that's important and necessary and healthy, and that dad is different from mom and needs to be there and contributes certain things.
It's interesting because we've got, like, you can come up with this idea that, you know, kids should be raised to have, you know, strong ideas of what they want to be like as parents. You know, those are, you know, kind of subtle ideas, but, you know, be a good example and your kids will hopefully follow that example. But yeah, it's one of those things, is it's so hard when you're not getting that much time to influence your kids as they grow up. So how do you guarantee that, or maybe not guarantee, but how do you hope and ensure that you're making enough of a difference that the cycle doesn't just keep repeating itself?
Yeah. And I mean, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, it's a good thing we have forums now. It's a good thing we have these, you know, Netflix or whatever alternatives that allow us to, you know, create a little bit. But I think it does come down to just taking the time to create a different social life for your family in general. You know, and spend time with people from your parish, not, you know, people from your work or the bar or whatever, you know, try to find people
like we're moving to a smaller town where we can hopefully connect with more local people. Mm-hmm. And you know, it's got its downsides because it, you know, it's going to be a longer drive to go do groceries and that mm-hmm. kind of thing. But we've got this hope and this dream that, you know, 5 years from now, we'll know, you know, people on our own block that we can walk over to, or be able to say, hey, yeah, go play hockey in the street with the other kids and that kind of thing. And just like, we're taking a bit of a cut in some of the benefits of living in the city, mm-hmm. with the idea that, you know, we will get more time outside and more time with more in-person time with people who are close by that we can see regularly.
Yeah. Right. Well, and I mean, I think I mention this too often, but, you know, the fact that I just moved my entire family, 5 people, 900 miles halfway across the US to just be closer to home, be closer to our families, and be able to, you know, for my kids to be able to get to be raised with their grandparents, not, you know, not just only see them a few times a year, you know. I think that family, that's more of sort of more extended family figures into the whole thing as well.
Yeah, having present extended family is definitely instrumental. Like I grew up being an 8-hour drive from one set of grandparents and an 8-hour flight from the other set. So I didn't have any relatives around.
Yeah.
So, and now I'm 12 hours by car away from my parents, but I'm minutes away from my in-laws. So at least the kids, they've got, you know, daily visits with their grandparents. And I think that makes a big difference, just being able to interact with more of the family. Cause that's how you learn social skills to begin with, is with family.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I don't understand the whole idea of like only children. I mean, like if you can't have kids, you can't have kids, but I mean, man, that's just gotta be so hard to be very young by yourself, you know, without siblings.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, the problem is certainly that your parents or your in-laws or whatever can also be subversive too, right? I mean, they can also be part of this, you know, overarching anti-family zeitgeist, but at least there's a better chance that they came from a previous generation that was a little bit more amenable to sort of traditional, you know, parental roles and stuff like that. And so with that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up.
Thanks for listening to the Trad Dads podcast. If you enjoyed our show, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app and consider giving us a 5-star rating on iTunes. It really helps us out.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.